somebody wrote in the Reddit thread saying, so I was playing Guilty Gear Rev 2 with my friend while I was playing Axel, and my friend took issue with the fact that I was gonna wait for him to do something instead of acting on my own. Knowing something instead of, well, knowing my friend despises zoners in any fighting game, I didn't really think twice about it, but now it has me thinking: Is it possible to play two defensively? So that's an interesting topic. Is it possible to play two defensively in fighting games? So is there just to a point? Nobody really says you play two offensively, but is there such thing as playing two defensively? So we'll give it over to you guys. Action Hank, I mean Mr. Gaming Lift, will give it
Action
over to you.
Hank.
Um, so I would consider myself more of a defensive player. I like to kind of like play the field. I don't like doing unnecessary stuff if I don't have to, because a lot of times doing unnecessary stuff can get you killed. Especially depending on like the player that you're playing against. A lot of people, you might play somebody good and you might play somebody that's on a higher level, and they might punish you for every little thing that good player never didn't punish you for. And also, man, some folks just want to press buttons. I'm just gonna be real. Some folks just want to press buttons on the controller. They just want to be like, it's a one-player game. Stop like. So, and I feel like a lot of people that when they have an issue with a character that keeps them out, or it's like they haven't really thought about the part of the game plan that calls for strategy, adapting, and defense. It was just like offense. So it's like once your offense is stopped, it's like you don't have your like your whole train of thought is just stopped, because your only train of thought was offense. You never thought to yourself, well, what if this person keeps me out? How am I going to adjust to that? How am I going to adapt to that? What do I have to do further? It's like all I know is punching and combos, so I can't do that. So what do I do? You know, um, and it depends. Like there's certain degrees to it, different levels. You got like your Fang type characters. You got your Vegas. Then you got like your Dawsons, those type of characters that just like can really control a whole lot of the screen, a whole lot of real estate. Um, so you have to be very methodical, and it's annoying for sure. It's annoying, but it's also kind of rewarding when you can kind of like uh figure out how to get around that type of stuff. Like for instance, I never forget this legendary clip of Daigo. This man whiffed punished a full screen stand fearsome Dawson. And I'm just like, that's how you do it. And you go to training mode and practice that type of stuff. And it was just like, bro, that was just so beautiful. Like this man, you got heavy punch, and he just like, oh, you did a
Would have
heavy
thought that
punch.
would never work. Like, you'd have thought that fireball would never make it. Like that was crazy.
And that's the thing. He knew to do that. He did the heavy punch version because that's the fastest version. If he'd have did either other the medium or light version, it wouldn't have worked. So the fact that he not only whiff punished that withstand fierce, the fact that he just muscle memory just took over and he knew to adjust to make it a heavy fireball, heavy super was just immaculate. So it's like seeing those type of things so rewarding when you're playing against those type of characters. And I mean, I think there is a thing is playing too defensive in the sense that you let's say you don't have the life lead. Now there's ways to play it because the clock is also a weapon as well. It's a tool to be used. So if you don't have the life lead and you're to being defensive, it's like at that point you have to make a decision. You gotta do something. Like you have to, unless you're like maybe you're ball rock, you're trying up a tap punch and you're trying to get that one tap punch out, which is like not really the best option to use. But I mean, what if you hit it and you do like 60% damage in one hit? But you got to be to this point. Like the clock is also a tool. So if you got the life lead and you have the character that can control real estate, go ahead. Just try to be defensive. Eliminate as many unneeded moves as possible. If you don't have to do anything, don't do anything until they force you to do something where they take the life lead back or something. Okay, but if you're just being defensive because you're just like, oh, he's mixing me up. I can't attack. I don't. That's different. It's a fighting game. You do have to get some hits off, but you got to be smart about it. If you have the life lead, I feel like, hey, be defensive. And if they, especially if they can't get around it, or if they're having a hard time doing it, for me personally, I love seeing players like Dominion. He's probably the best example I can think about. Dominion would literally be in a corner with like Gal just sitting there. Most people don't want to be in the corner. If you're in the corner, that's pressure city, mix up city. You know, he would just be in the corner like, I'm good, just blocking, taking throws, and they were just like, bro, I can't do anything to this man. It's like, and then when you try to retaliate, you either get flash kicks, like forward fierce or something like that. It's like I love seeing that type of stuff, and he would always like utilize his life lead, and just being like, look, I'm going to strategically use like my moves. I'm not gonna throw out just unnecessary stuff. You force me to do something, I will. But now the ball is in your court. Make me get out of this corner. If you can make me get out of this corner, if you can open me up, cool. If you can't, I guess you're gonna lose. So it just depends. Like it's a situational thing, scenarios where you can be too defensive and too offensive. Because if you're too offensive, let's say you throw out a move, you whiff it or they block it, or something happens and you get killed for that. So sometimes it's like a playing in those gray areas. It's black and then it's white on both ends of the spectrum. And there's those gray areas you got to play in to know when to be defensive and when to be offensive. So
yeah,
that's pretty much my take on it. But I personally like to see defensive play, and people utilizing the options because a lot of people don't like to see it, but using the clock, it's a tool.
When you're playing a match, I think like there's a certain point where like you kind of have to go on the offensive. I think I'll put it this way, like you got to do something, man. At some point, you got to do something because especially in games where there's chip damage and stuff, I mean, you can be really defensive and like you can block everything, but in a game where there's chip damage, somebody comes over, chips you out a couple minutes. I mean, even if it's by a hair and they still have more health than you, they just back off and now you got to go and do something about it, But at the same time, like I say that it's like, well, Devin was saying, it's all situational, man. You can't be one extreme or the other. You can't be too offensive. You can't be too defensive because then you're kind of neglecting, one half of the game almost. One thing, like, especially when I started out playing Tekken, one of my issues was, with Miguel, I was way too offensive. I was not patient at all. I wanted to just keep attacking. And, like I would like if somebody countered me, like whiff punched me and launched me or something like that, I just have to hold that L, But so it was it wasn't really a thing of like, man, am I going to like I'm gonna have to like do this? I got to work on my spacing. I got to work on placement of my moves and stuff. I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna keep attacking you until there's an opening, and then eventually something's gonna happen. So either I'm going to win this or I don't. Which, I mean, as a beginner player, somebody who's beginning to learn the game, it's not a horrible way of thinking, but it's definitely not optimal. It's definitely suboptimal, I'll say. It's like, it's cool. That's a way that, you play with like your friends and stuff. But if you're trying to be a competitor, if you're trying to be somebody who can play against people on a higher level, that's definitely not the way to go about it. On the other hand, if you're way too defensive and you're and like the thing is, it's interesting because like now that I'm thinking about it, it's like if you're really offensive and that like this person is not going to be able to punish this, like this is safe, this is safe, this is safe. You've got like all these strings going on, and you're able to put down the hard reads. Then maybe being really offensive might work for you. Just like on the other side of the spectrum, if you're really defensive and the other person's like habits, maybe their habits, they what like the properties of their moves and stuff. Being really defensive will really help you. It all depends. I guess it all comes down to like knowledge. But I think like, in terms of like a normal match, I don't think it's really like great to be too defensive, because if you're too defensive, sometimes you miss out on opportunities that I've been too defensive before where I've just stood there and I've just blocked, and man, it's really interesting because then all these factors come into play about your confidence in your moves, your confidence in your knowledge, whether or not the other person has, how much is the confidence that they have in their moves and their knowledge about their character, your character, what situation they're in, what situation you're in. Like all this stuff comes into play, and I mean, is it like the more defensive you get, I mean, if you're really defensive and you have like really high game knowledge, like if you really, really, really know what's going on, then maybe you might not be, maybe there might not be a too defensive fighting style. On the other hand, there might not be a too offensive fighting style if your game knowledge is really good. I really, that's interesting. I don't know. Now that I think about it, there might not be, to one way or the other, there might not be that much, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there might not be too offensive, might not be too defensive. Now, if you're just like completely abandoned, if you don't have the game knowledge and you don't have the confidence in your moves and stuff like that, that's a completely different story, because then, yes, you can be too offensive, and yes, you can be too defensive, because if you're just like the blocking and stuff like that, and you're not taking opportunities and you're not trying out to see what might punish this move, you're not learning anything. So you're not becoming better. Your defense isn't really evolving. Just like if you're playing, if you're just attacking people and using big moves and stuff like that, and you keep getting punished for it, you're not really learning anything. You got to like try different moves, try different things, try different avenues. It's all kind of interlinked. The best thing to do, I think, was to find a happy medium between being offensive and defensive. Like Devin was saying, you got to play in that gray area, because you're going, at some point you're going to need to block. At some point, I mean, no matter how good you are, some way, somehow, somebody is going to get the upper hand on you, and you need to know what to do in that situation. And of course, when you get the advantage, you need to know how to take advantage of your advantage. You need to know how to press the advantage. So, I don't know, man. I'm not 100% sure. I think that there's definitely I guess it depends on the player about whether you're too defensive or offensive. I think it all comes down to what kind of player you are. Like each and every single player, whether or not you feel like you're being too defensive, whether or not you as a player skew one way or the other. I guess sometimes if defense isn't your thing, you might have to skew a little bit more towards offense. And if if being more patient is your thing, you got to skew a little bit more towards defense. It's all situational, and it's based on player. So yeah, that is my convoluted answer.
We appreciate you for the dissertation, Mr. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
So with this question, it's really kind of hard just to give it a concrete yes, no, maybe. So I wrote down some things that I just kind of was, it's like it varies. Like, I guess it could depend on what type of character one thing is, it could depend on what type of character you're playing. Like if you're playing like a rush down character, like, and you're like, most of the time we see you on the screen, it's just like you're just kind of like playing the defense. It's just like you're not using that character to the best of its ability. So that could be a situation where it's like you're playing too defensively. If you want to play that defensively, maybe go pick this character, because this character, this is not his strong suit. So his or her strong suit. So that might be a reason why somebody could tell you're playing too defensively. Also, defense can sometimes be the best offense. I mean, offense can be the best defense sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you deal with characters like Gal and stuff like that, like his defense is his offense of just keeping you out and basically making it to where like he controls the pay. I remember playing against Gals, and like, back when I didn't really know too much about Street Fighter and techniques and stuff, it's like they just sonic boom, sonic boom, sonic boom, sonic boom, and you jumping over, jumping over, jumping over, jumping over until you jump over one too many times, then it's flash kick, and then let's start this cycle all over again. So, his offense is his defense. So that's an example of just like, could you say that person is being too defensively? No, like he's playing the character how it's supposed to be played. Like that's how you play the character, defensively. So that's another thing that comes to my mind. Then also, offense isn't the only option you have in the game. I mean, it's not like it's not like this game or fighting games don't have a block button or don't have a way to block. So obviously it's put in the game for you to utilize it, and it's not the only thing that can be utilized. I think just a lot now we've like not even fighting games, just like even if you look at sports like boxing, like some people can't stand Floyd Mayweather because he's so defensive, but that's how he's winning all his matches. That's how he's become like who he is, and you just can't wait to see him lose because like he's picked a game plan that's like great for him. He's very, very defensive, and he's learned that it's not too much about going out here and trying to like knock somebody block off their shoulder. So, you know, in fight games, it can be used the same way. I mean, there's characters that you can utilize like that. So I wouldn't necessarily say is there such thing as playing too defensively? It depends on the circumstances. But just like in fighting games in general, would I say in fighting games there's such thing as playing too much defensively? No. I mean, even if you go back to like games like Pokemon, when you played against Wobbuffet, like you fight a Wobbuffet, like his whole thing is defense. Just have a high defense, high health. My attack is trash, but you keep hitting me enough. I got a move called counter, which is basically a defensive move, and I'm gonna kill you. And like he wins just off defense. Like that's his strategy, defense, taking a bunch of hits and dishing it back out to you. So I don't necessarily believe just overall there's such thing as too much like you're playing too defensively, but I do believe there's situations where people can come up to you and be like, "Hey, you're playing too defensively." So yeah, that's my roundabout way of breaking down and just saying no. So it's